But first, with the polls as they are, there's still a risk of last-minute upset due to complacency, apathy, and the reluctance of some voters to run the gauntlet of a noisy yes campaign. Now, people I know personally who've been standing on pre-polls over the past 2 weeks say they've never seen the sort of personal attacks they're witnessing in this referendum before. That's because the yes camp are desperate, and they know that the harder you target individuals, the more moral pressure you pile on them, the more likely they will fold. Fold or stay away from the polling booths altogether and just not subject themselves to hectoring. But if you want to keep our constitution colourblind, well, you can't leave voting to others. Even if the no case looks like it will win, it has not yet won. Meaning if no supporters don't get out there in force, we still risk waking up on Sunday morning with some of us having more say than others over how our government works based on race and ancestry. Of course, one thing that the most recent polling has done is explode the yes case myth that 80% of Aboriginal people support the voice. The latest Resolve poll, taken largely, of course, in New South Wales and Victoria, where sampling is easier, has just 60% Indigenous support for the voice, even though it's pitched as a great advance specifically for them. Indeed, it's testimony to their good sense and patriotism that so many Aboriginal people haven't bought the yes line, that they've been ripped off by colonial events 2 centuries ago, and that only a constitutionally entrenched separatist voice can make things good. And as for the view that a no vote will somehow break people's hearts, sure, there will be disappointment either way, whatever happens on Saturday night, and frustration, of course, amongst yes voters if it goes down. But it's better to have a few bad days than end up with a bad mistake permanently baked into our constitution. And as for the PM's threats, the world will think worse of us if we vote no, those pro-terrorist scenes at the Opera House on Monday that took him far too long to condemn, well, I know that's damaged us more as a nation than any free democratic vote in a referendum ever could. So let me say this before the left try and rewrite the narrative should the yes vote lose. There's no way a successful no vote should be taken as a rejection of Aboriginal people. It would actually be an affirmation that all of us, black, white and everyone else in between, should live and work together as equals, as Australians first and foremost, and not divided by our bloodlines. Especially when right now, in image after horrific image, we've got the grim example of the hatreds that flow when everything is all about race. There have been few uglier spectacles than those anti-Semitic thugs out the front of the Opera House, all lit up in solidarity with Israel, spewing their bile and pro-terrorist propaganda, and those chants I never thought I'd hear again in my lifetime, gas the Jews. Now, they might not have been wearing Nazi uniforms, but they were certainly shouting race hate. And yet the police, who are so quick to crush lockdown protests with their riot squads and rubber bullets as we live through here week after week in Victoria, they did nothing to stop it. Indeed, shamefully, they facilitated it.
We were better to facilitate that march to the Sydney Opera House. They had a point of destination, undesirable for everyone, how it may have been, but we had no power, if we didn't facilitate that march, to stop people walking down there anyway.
That's official gutlessness. Enforce the law, Commander. But this is what happens when people see their fellow human beings only through the prism of race and try to undo history and try to resurrect land claims with talk of treaties that set us all against each other. That's always been one of the big flaws at the heart of this voice push, this view that the settlement of Australia was somehow illegitimate, and that to atone for this so-called sin, Aboriginal people had to be given special status with rights and privileges over and above those available to every other Australian. That's not how it should work in a democracy. For centuries, you can argue that women have suffered significant systemic disadvantage. But there's no talk of a voice to the parliament for women. And look, if there was, like quotas, I would oppose it just as strongly as I do now, because all of us must be equal, regardless of race, gender, sexuality or anything else, equal before the law and equal in our constitution. Despite the PM's glib lines, the voice has never been about listening to Aboriginal people, because for the past 50 years, that's exactly what we've done. Indeed, there's hundreds and hundreds of Aboriginal bodies around the country spending taxpayer billions, but none of them taking responsibility that things haven't changed as much as we would like, despite all the money and the goodwill of Australians.
The Aboriginal industry feels threatened and want this transfer of power because for the first time in our history we're actually overrepresented in federal parliament, and there are those of us like myself and my colleague Senator Karen Little as well as Senator Thorpe who are questioning the status quo, who are questioning where the billions of dollars are going to year in, year out. We want to understand better where it has been going, where it's been misspent, misused, and holding to account, applying accountability for those who are responsible for improving the lives of our marginalised. I mean, let's face it, if we in fact were to get rid of the marginalisation, there are a lot of organisations, particularly right here in Central Australia and the Northern Territory, that would no longer be required to exist.
She nails it, doesn't she? I mean, too often it's the wrong Indigenous voices, the separatist voices, rather than the unity voices that have controlled the microphone and got the attention of our political leaders. Now, thank God that whatever the result on Saturday, I sense a real changing of the guard, and that's a good thing. But as positive as the polls might be, if you're saying yes to a united Australia by voting no to this divisive voice, it would be a mistake to take Saturday's result for granted or assume it's all over bar the shouting. This could easily be the political version of a game that's lost or won in the final minutes before the siren. But if the result is no, it certainly can't be business as usual, as I said in my column in The Australian today. Whatever the result, the problems of remote Australia, where so many Aboriginal people are doing it tough, they will have to be addressed. And an end to the excuses and the waste from politicians and the urban Indigenous elites. Kids must go to school, no excuses. If Aboriginal women and children are abused, then the full force of the law must be applied to the perpetrators, regardless of culture. And just like anyone else, the expectation must be that Aboriginal people have the dignity of work and not a life on welfare. As Noel Pearson used to say, welfare is the poison that is killing my people. And that it's the tyranny of low expectations, he said, that's at the heart of Indigenous disadvantage. On Saturday night, if the vote is no, it's not just a result rejecting the voice. It's also a rejection of a whole lot of other stuff that's crept in and stuff that implies that some of us are more Australian than others, and that too should all be done away with from Saturday. Like the constant acknowledgements of country as if this land belongs to some of us but not all of us. A welcome to country by Aboriginal people at an Aboriginal event, fine. But enough of the mindless repetition of empty words by speaker after speaker at public events and now even private work meetings, to the point that it's almost a farce. Like too, the constant flying of the Aboriginal flag alongside our one and only national flag, as if the flag of some of us should have equal standing to the flag of all of us. If the result is no, no one should be apologetic or feel the need to placate the activists behind the voice. Because no is a vote of confidence in Australia's future. A vote of no is a rejection of the revisionism and unbalanced shame about our past. What this week in Israel has shown me, and I suspect many other Australians, is that once you go down the path of race division, it is a path that takes us all backwards, not forwards, as one people. Once you go down that path, it's a path of no turning back.